Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Cookball Berkeley class for Earth Month. It's plant-based and planet-friendly. So last week was Earth Week and Earth Day, so we're celebrating with all plant-based recipes. And my name is Kim Guess, and I'm a dietitian here with Work Wellness Program. And I also wanted to introduce our dietetic intern who helps make sure I didn't burn anything in the kitchen today. This is Carol. Carol, do you want to say hi? So Carol's doing a 3-week internship rotation with us and is getting ready to graduate in a few weeks. Okay. All right. So on your plate, you have a couple of recipes already made. So one of them is a creamy Italian white bean skillet. And if you're on Zoom, these recipes are linked in the BCal. So this is like a 1-pot meal. And then the other one is vegan chorizo crumble. So kind of chorizo inspired tofu mixture. All right, so why are we doing this class today? Well, eating plants is good for your health. It's good for the planet. It can be good for your wallet too. But that doesn't mean that you have to go totally vegan to experience the benefits. Even just incorporating a little bit more plants, going meatless once a week, twice a week, can make a difference. So animal foods generally take more resources to produce, like water, energy, feed, and processing. So some environmental benefits of eating less animal products is reduced carbon emissions, reduced use of fresh water, less pollution, less deforestation. Another point is it's also important to eat a variety of foods. The more variety we have, the better our food security is. If we rely on a limited variety of crops, then they can be more vulnerable to climate change, to disease or pest infestation, and that can really threaten our food supply. So it's good to eat a variety of foods in general, and even a variety of, different types of, let's say, tomatoes. There's, the regular big beefsteak tomatoes you get at the grocery store, but there's like thousands of other kinds of tomatoes out there. So what else? Oh, I just want to mention there's something called the Future 50 list, and this list of 50 foods that have high nutritional value, low environmental impact, they're accessible, they have good flavor, and are affordable. So some of the food categories are mushrooms, beans and pulses, which is like lentils and beans and pulses, beans and lentils, algae, cacti, nuts, and tubers. So some of the foods from the Future 50 list that we're using today are soybeans in the form of tofu, beans, which help enrich the soil and deliver more protein per hectare than any other crop, as well as spinach, which grows quickly and can be cultivated year-round. So in terms of our health, plant foods are generally very nutritious and good for health. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. But basically in the US, a lot of people don't eat enough vegetables, beans, fruit, and whole grains. And these foods can reduce your risk of chronic disease like diabetes, heart disease, and certain types of cancer. Plus, plant foods are high in fiber and phytochemicals. So if you saw our newsletter this month, you will have seen Carol's contribution about fiber. Most people do not eat enough fiber. They maybe get like half as much as they need in a day. I know protein gets a lot of attention in the media, but a lot of us are not getting enough fiber. So eat more plants to get more fiber. And drink plenty of water if you increase your fiber, so you don't end up with constipation or anything. Okay. So let's get started with we're gonna make the creamy white bean skillet first. So for this recipe, the reason why I like it is because there's not a whole lot of chopping. Most of the vegetables you're just kind of throwing in the pan. And it's really tasty, and you can dip bread in it, which is one of my favorite ways to eat meals. We did something kind of similar last month with a white bean meal. So the first thing that you do is a step that we did ahead, and we have samples in the back if anybody didn't get samples. So we're gonna use soaked cashews instead of cream to make this creamy. So that's how we're eliminating the dairy. So you could use dairy instead if you wanted to, but I wanted to show you a creative way to use cashews. So these cashews have been soaked already in hot water. So I'll show them on Zoom. They look a little funny and unappetizing, but I promise they're good once you blend them up. And so you just want to make sure you use raw and not toasted cashews because the toasted ones won't blend as well. So what we did is we soaked half a cup of raw cashews in hot water, and you can see they grew by about 50%, so that's kind of cool. And that would be your first step. So we'll just set that aside and pretend that they are steeping right now, and then we're gonna make the rest of the stuff in the pan. So this pan here, these burners take a little while to heat up. So, and I realize you can't see the cutting board if this is here. Rearrange a little bit. Okay, so the only chopping that we're doing really is shallots and garlic and some basil. So we have one shallot here. I'm just gonna use the little cutting board. Okay, so we're gonna mince up one shallot, and you could easily use onion if you wanted, red onion, or really any kind. It doesn't matter too much, but shallots kind of have a nice flavor that's sort of like a mix between garlic and onion. But if you don't have one, that's okay too. This recipe is pretty flexible. Oops. A little hard to get the skin off with gloves on here. I'm just gonna cut it in half. So I kind of cut it just like an onion. We'll get the peel off. And we're gonna mince it up pretty fine. Just rip that whole thing off. Okay, so to mince it, if you want to mince shallot really fine, you can kind of do a horizontal cut first. And then hopefully you can see this. Cuts lengthwise. And then I'm going to make my claw that I always talk about in this class. You don't cut your fingertips, and just use your knuckles to guide the knife so that everything is cut consistently, and it's pretty much impossible to cut your fingertips. Okay, so do that again with the other half. All right. That's slowly heating up. Okay, so we have a large rim skillet. You can use a nonstick pan, but stainless steel works perfectly fine. Nothing is too sticky in this recipe, so I like to use stainless steel. And I'm just gonna eyeball 2 tablespoons of olive oil. You can measure it if you want, but I like to eyeball things. And then we're gonna throw in the shallots once this is warm. Ooh. And one way that you can tell when the oil is warm is if you rub the pan back and forth, you'll see these ripples. And right now it's rippling, but it's like one big wave. So when you see more little ripples is when it's hot. That needs another second. But we can get everything else ready. Oops. Keep things neat and tidy here. Okay, so we're also gonna need cherry tomatoes and sliced garlic. So we have 2 pints of cherry tomatoes already rinsed and ready to go. That's something I love about this recipe is we're just throwing them in whole. Okay, that's rippling a little bit more. Let's test it and see if it sizzles. Not quite yet. It takes a minute. And then we're also going to need some garlic So we're gonna do 4 to 5 cloves sliced. These are pretty small cloves, so I'll probably do a little extra. That's 5. We'll do like 7 small ones. All right, that's sizzling a little bit. So we're gonna throw in our shallots. And just keep an eye on these because these can burn kind of quickly, which is what I almost did earlier. Carol saved me. Okay. So those just need to cook until they start to brown a little bit. They'll start to go from kind of purple to more brown, and they'll start to become translucent, and that's when they're almost ready. So for the garlic, we're just gonna put the knife on top and carefully crush it to remove the paper. And then we'll slice it up and throw it in with the tomatoes in a few minutes. So this recipe is kind of a one-pot meal, and it's a nice hearty and filling combination of protein, fiber, and vegetables. And you know, a lot of people, when they eat less meat, they're worried about getting enough protein and iron. But we have a lot of protein from the beans as well as the cashews that we're going to use to make the cream sauce. And there are plant sources of iron that aren't absorbed as well as animal-based iron. But if you pair it with a source of vitamin C, it's absorbed more easily. So we have iron in the form of beans and spinach, and vitamin C from the tomatoes as well as the spinach. So this is a good combination. And if you actually cook in cast iron, the food will absorb some iron from the pan, which is actually a good thing, especially if you're not eating a lot of meat. Okay, so those shallots are almost done. I think once I get the garlic all chopped, we'll be ready. Yeah, you can mince it or press it if you prefer. I think maybe just the author of this recipe likes the texture and the like burst of garlic you get when it's sliced. So I should mention who the author of this recipe is from a blog called Minimalist Baker. I've used a lot of their recipes in cooking classes. So I want to make sure to acknowledge them for creating this wonderful recipe. Okay, so again, these are already washed, so I'm just gonna dump them right in, really easy. So we're adding whole cherry tomatoes, sliced garlic, which I'm gonna slice right now. Just gonna kind of do it roughly. And you can either add white wine or just water. So I used water in this recipe in your samples. Okay. Sorry, not the water or wine yet. That's in 2 minutes. So we're just gonna let this cook for a couple minutes. And if you like spicy, you can add some red chili flakes. I always try to keep everything pretty mild for the sample, so I didn't put the chili flakes in here. So if you like that, this is when you would add them. Half a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Okay, so we're just gonna let that cook for a couple minutes. I have my water ready. We are going to add half a cup of it. And so meanwhile, your cashews would be soaking in the hot water. That's already done. So we can go ahead and blend those up. You can use a food processor or a high-speed blender. Most part, when a recipe calls for a cashew cream, the benefits of cashews are that they're really soft and they don't have a lot of flavor. So I don't know if there's another nut that's comparable. You know, you might be able to make it work, especially if you have a really high-powered blender like a Vitamix. But even the cashews, in this food processor, you got to run it for a while to get it smooth. So I think you do kind of want the soft nut.
I use raw almonds for
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think almonds would work if they're raw and you soak them and they don't have the skins on. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's worth a try. Okay. So this is on a little low, so I'm gonna turn it up. And so now we have our raw cashews, plus we're gonna add 1¼ cup water to make the cashew cream. One. Smell the garlic and the shallots? Oh, yeah. Yeah, the whole building is gonna smell. You probably smelled it when you walked in, honestly. Okay, so sorry, it's gonna be a little loud, but I'm just gonna run it for a little while. It's not totally waterproof, so at first it might leak a little bit. Okay, so just to show you, it does take a little while in here. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. It's still kind of chunky. Oops. So it needs to run for a couple minutes. We'll just keep this going here. So you do kind of want the garlic and the shallots to brown a little bit before you add the water or the wine, because once you add that liquid, it's not going to really brown anymore. So if it takes more than a couple minutes, maybe just keep cooking a little bit. So that's going to give it a really nice flavor. Oh. We're also going to be adding white beans, which on the recipe, it just says white beans. We were talking about this before class. So what is a white bean? It's kind of like a catch-all term for beans that are light in color. There's different kinds. These are Great Northern, which I like. There's also navy beans that are kind of similar. And then there's bigger beans like cannellini. So you could use whatever your preference is. I personally like the ones that are a little smaller. So you can see on the screen. They're about the size of like maybe about a black bean or a pinto bean. So we already went ahead and rinsed and drained those. Okay, that should be good. So see if I can take that off. You can see on the screen, it's pretty thick. Can you see how it's thick and pretty well combined? It's the consistency of like a really thick oat milk. So just cashews and water. So even if you eat dairy, you know, sometimes it's nice to use cashew cream because you can make it with an ingredient that's shelf stable. You can just keep raw cashews on hand. And if you need cream for something and you don't have any or don't want to go to the store, you can just whip up a batch really easily. And it's not too costly either. I bought, especially since it's Earth Month, I wanted to talk about reducing waste in the kitchen. So some stores like Berkeley Bowl will let you bring your own jars and you weigh them before you fill it. You go and fill it with what you want and write the number of the item on there. And then they weigh it after and they take out the weight of your container. So I have this jar that actually has markings. So I knew I needed, actually I bought too many cashews, but I needed half a pint or 1 cup. But I actually bought 2 cups of cashews for $5. So the amount of cashews needed for this recipe was like $1.25 worth. So I don't know, that might be cheaper than buying a cup of cream. I'm not sure what the prices are these days. And the benefit is that in most plant foods, when it's a food that has fiber, there's always a mix. I'm sorry, when it's a food that has fat, there's always a mix of different types of fat, unsaturated and saturated. And the type of fat that's in most plant foods, with the exception of some foods like coconut, it's mostly unsaturated, which is more heart healthy. So by replacing dairy, which will mostly have saturated fat, like in cream, you're getting a lot more of those heart healthy unsaturated fats in the cashews. Plus the benefit of, a little bit of fiber and other micronutrients. Okay, so you can see maybe on here, let's see if I hold it up, you can see some of the tomatoes are starting to kind of blister and the skins are starting to come off a little bit. So that's what we want. We don't want any whole tomatoes that are completely intact that will pop in your mouth and burn you really badly when you eat it. So as it cooks, you'll want to look for that and maybe carefully pop them with the back of your wooden spoon. But be careful because, hot liquid can shoot out. So if you just let it cook for a while, it'll probably happen naturally. But that's a good way to tell when things are done. So some of the juices of the tomatoes are coming out. The shallots are browning a little bit, so we can go ahead and add our liquid. So we're gonna add half a cup of water or white wine if you are using that at home. And we're gonna let it cook for, where am I? Why is it so hard to read? Cook for 2 minutes, add the wine, cook for another 5 to 8 minutes. So we'll let that keep going for a few minutes. Just to break down the tomatoes a little bit more. Okay, and then we made the cashew cream. And then we're gonna stir in basil and spinach. I have some fresh basil here that I washed. The way that I usually like to wash herbs is to fill a bowl with water and dunk the whole bunch in there and shake it around. And because sometimes if you just rinse it in the sink, you're not really getting all the nooks and crannies. So with basil, we just want the leaves. Some herbs you can keep the stems in there, like parsley. It's pretty tender, but not so much with basil. It won't hurt you, but it's not a great texture. So I'm just gonna peel the leaves off. We need 2 tablespoons worth of basil sliced. It doesn't have to be exact. If you don't like basil, you can leave it out. If you prefer parsley, you could just add that at the end. I wouldn't cook it. I would just garnish it at the end. And if you love basil, you can double it, do whatever you want with this recipe. But we're gonna chiffonade the basil, which is just cutting it into strips. So basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna stack all the leaves on top of each other. It doesn't have to be in size order or anything. And then we're gonna roll it up really tight. You probably can't see this with all the stuff in the way. So we rolled it up and then we're just gonna make some slices. And you don't really have to cut it this way. You could chop it more roughly if you want, but that's often how basil is prepared in recipes, and it just looks kind of nice, especially if you garnish. You can separate it, see how that looks. So that's probably a little more than 2 tablespoons, but that's all right. Okay. So we're gonna let that cook for a minute, and we are going to get started on the next recipe. Okay, so the next recipe is a tofu chorizo. And the first step is to drain the tofu. So this is extra firm tofu, which works well when you want like that chewy texture. And this is meant to be sort of like the soft chorizo, not the kind that's in casing that you would slice. So we want it to be kind of chewy and crumbly. And basically tofu, is on the spectrum from medium firm to extra firm or even super firm. And just the more firm it is, the more water has been pressed out, the more concentrated everything is. That fork later. So you know, depends on what recipe you're making, but that will determine what kind of tofu you want to use. And those definitions are not standardized, so it really depends on the brand. So you might try one brand and find that the extra firm is kind of watery. So unfortunately, it just takes a little trial and error. Okay. So we already pressed the tofu for a while to remove some of the excess water. And I'm gonna use a nonstick skillet for this because tofu can be a bit sticky. Go anywhere. Okay. And we're gonna cook it in olive oil, but it also, the recipe says vegetable oil or coconut oil, so you can use whatever oil you want. If you use something like virgin coconut oil, it will have a coconut flavor, so if you don't like that, then maybe stick to a more neutral flavored oil like canola or safflower or sunflower. And it calls for a 1/4 cup of oil, which might sound like kind of a lot. And if that's too much for you, you can use less. But if you've had like regular pork chorizo, it is pretty greasy. So that's just kind of helping mimic that consistency and flavor. But instead of getting the fat from pork, we're getting it from olive oil, which again has more of those unsaturated fats, especially the monounsaturated fats that most of us probably use a little more of. And then we're going to crumble the tofu. I just crumble it right into the pan, and we're going to get it a little bit brown, and then we'll add everything else. So the other things that we're adding are red onion. I had a little leftover, so I'll probably just throw this in. You don't need to see me cut more red onion. And a little bit of garlic. And so you could just use garlic powder and onion powder and mix that in your sauce for this recipe, but the website where I got it is called Cinnamon Snail. And they recommended actually using the vegetables, so it kind of gives a nice texture and flavor. So you can, you know, you can change it if you want, but that's what the chef recommended there. All right, so let's check on our tomatoes. There's still a few that are whole, so I'm just kind of carefully pushing on them with the back of the spoon, and you might see that they're kind of popping a little bit. So I try to like make sure that they're not pointing right at me when I pop them, so they don't shoot at me. But you can also just wait till they pop on their own. So needs to cook a little bit longer. Let's go ahead and just add the beans. Beans added. And what else? Okay, so we're just gonna let those cook. Think maybe the surge protector turned off so that it's not cooking anymore. All right, there we go. Okay. So we got about 20 minutes left, starting all right. So this kind of got a little bit cold when the power went off. So we'll let that come up to temperature again. And then we'll add the cashew cream. And I think it might be a little overloaded, so you might have to do one thing at a time here. I'm gonna turn this off. Okay, so we'll just skip ahead a little bit on this recipe, which is Thomas or Carol, can you help me with this? Thing is not on. No. Oh, now it's on. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think we're good, but I don't know if it needs to be rearranged. Okay, so The last step really is just adding the cashew cream. So again, you can kind of see how nice and thick it is. Check that out. So luscious. And that's what makes this recipe so savory and creamy. And then you just kind of keep cooking it until it all thickens up and gets well combined. And then stir in the spinach, 4 cups of spinach at the end, and the basil. So I like how the recipe uses the whole cherry tomatoes and the baby spinach, because that's, you know, your main vegetables. You don't even have to chop. You can just add them whole. All right.
The finger burner is my bucket, so it should be good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that was not hot at all, so we got to heat that up. Meanwhile, we can make our sauce for the tofu chorizo. So I went ahead and measured out all the spices that you need. So we have a tablespoon of chili powder, 1.5 teaspoons of smoked paprika, a teaspoon of dried oregano, half a teaspoon of black pepper and coriander, a 1/4 teaspoon of cumin, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground cloves. So normally there's also a tablespoon of chipotle powder, which is chipotle is a smoked jalapeno that's kind of like a dark red, a little bit spicy. So I try to keep everything mild, so I left that out, but you can add that. It's a little hard to find, so you could add some other kind of dried chili. So one thing to note is that chili powder is not just dried chilies. There's other spices mixed in there, and so different brands have different blends. But usually it's fairly mild, but you can definitely find spicier ones. So be mindful of that if you really don't tolerate a lot of spice. Yeah, so I just measured those out ahead of time. And I think our oil is kind of hot. So we have our tofu here. So I'm just going to kind of crumble it by hand right into the pan. And if you end up with any pieces that are too big, then you can just break it up with your spoon. And I believe this recipe would freeze pretty well if you wanted to make extra. But probably your best bet is to thaw it overnight in the refrigerator and reheat it on the stove top, adding a little bit of water if needed to keep it from drying out. We have another recipe on our Cookable Berkeley page that's a tofu taco meat. Kind of a similar idea, but it's actually, that one's actually baked, which helps it get a little bit crispy. And that also freezes really well. When I make that, I usually double it and freeze some, and then I can just quickly throw together a meal with that. Okay, we just want that to brown a bit. And we can finish making our sauce. We're gonna throw all the spices in there. And then we're gonna add a few other things. So we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, which is the same as 1/8 of a cup. So I'll just use that. I do this every time, so you're probably sick of it, but I like to give a pop quiz on measurements for people who haven't been to these classes before. So does anybody know how many tablespoons are in a 1/4 cup? Yes, 4. So 2 tablespoons and 1/8 of a cup. And what about the number of teaspoons in a tablespoon? 3, yep. 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, 4 tablespoons in a 1/4 cup. What other measurements do we talk about? How many cups in a pint? 2? Yep, 2. How about in a quart? 4, yeah, 4 cups in a quart. 4 quarts in a gallon. So these little tidbits come in handy sometimes, especially if you're like doubling a recipe. All right. 2 tablespoons of tamari or soy sauce. Tamari is like soy sauce, but usually it's made without the wheat. And I think it has a little bit of a stronger flavor. Oops, that's the wrong measuring cup. So if you have a wheat allergy or somebody with celiac disease or gluten intolerance, then you can choose tamari. Just make sure that it is gluten-free if that's necessary. And this one is 25% less sodium, but still full of flavor. Okay, and then we're gonna add half a teaspoon of liquid smoke. So we want that smoky, meaty flavor that we're also getting a little bit from the smoked paprika. But this stuff is very concentrated. We'll definitely add a nice smoky flavor, whatever you're cooking. What is liquid smoke? Oh gosh, I had the same question at one point in my life, and I looked it up, and I think they just kind of smoke like wood chips and then have the water nearby, maybe all in one container. I don't know. Has anybody looked up how to make liquid smoke? Yeah, I'm not sure exactly of the process. Okay. And the last thing we're gonna add is a tablespoon of lime juice. So with any citrus that I'm juicing, I kind of roll it on the cutting board first, especially limes. Limes are pretty tough, right? So that's gonna help break up the cell walls a little bit so that it's easier to juice. I know you can't really see much with all my stuff in the way here, but just juicing the lime, nothing too exciting. Usually there's about a tablespoon of lime juice in each half. Let's see if that worked out.
They capture the smoke and condense it. That's how they make it.
What was it?
They capture the smoke and then condense it.
Oh, okay, yeah, so maybe they have the water in a container where they're smoking things and then they boil it to concentrate the flavor, maybe? Okay, so there is our sauce. Oh, we also have to add water. 1/4 cup of water. Ah, perfect. Okay, so that's gonna be our sauce that we pour over the tofu. So you can see it's kind of runny right now, but that's what we want. We want to like really coat everything. Okay, so we just want this to brown a bit. We might not have time to get as brown as I would like in this pot with our stovetop issue here. But I don't know if you can tell, like over here, this piece is kind of starting to get a little bit of browning on it. That's kind of what we want all over, and maybe some a little darker, depending on how you like it. If you want it softer, you could throw in the sauce now, or actually the onion is what comes next. But if you want it really chewy, if you prefer the chewier texture, I would say cook it longer in this stage and get it like really browned, if that's the texture you prefer.
Is there any thought that comes ahead of time to make it easier?
Yes, you could. Yeah. Let me come back to that and I'll answer your question.
What did you say would be the cost per person for these meals?
Cost per person. Let's figure that out. Okay, well, I will tell you that I doubled the chorizo recipe for the samples and made 1 batch of this for samples. So I basically made 2 of these, including right now, and 3 of these. And I had a few ingredients on hand, like the olive oil and the tamari, but I spent $50. So maybe like $10 per recipe. This isn't really a full meal, whereas this one is, so maybe that's not a fair estimation. Like this, you could put however you want to eat it. You could do this with eggs. You could make a tacos or a burrito. So this recipe is pretty affordable. The tofu is like $3. The tomato paste is a couple bucks. And then if you have the stuff on hand, it lasts you a long time. And a tip that's good for your wallet and the planet is buying your spices in the bulk section. Which I just love to brag about how cheap it is if you go to Berkeley Bowl. So all these spices here I have bought in my own containers, and nothing was more than $1. Like these ground cloves, I don't use ground cloves very much, so I didn't even fill the bottle, but it was 45 cents. And the oregano, I don't think I filled the jar all the way, but I've used quite a bit already, and this was 20 cents instead of like what, $4 or $5 for a jar. So you can definitely save money and reduce waste by bringing your own containers if you can shop somewhere that has that as an option. Some other stores will also let you have spices in bulk. Maybe they don't let you bring your own containers. So it kind of depends on what you have access to. Okay, but you can see it's starting to brown a little bit. The smaller pieces, of course, are going to brown a little bit more quickly. But we're kind of running low on time, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. We would add half a cup of red onion. And you could use white onion or whatever, but we kind of want like a dark red coloring on everything, so you get a little bit of a head start with the red onion. And 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. I bought the weirdest garlic. There's the teeniest little cloves here that makes it a little lower. So you don't need to see me cut up 8 small cloves of garlic again. So we'll just kind of pretend that this one is enough. This one I'm just gonna mince up. Sometimes at home I like to use the frozen garlic that comes already minced in a little pre-measured teaspoons. It's so easy. So you could use that as well if you're in a rush. Or jarred, you can buy jarred garlic. And if you don't have either, then you can also just do some garlic powder to get that flavor. But the fresh stuff is nice too. Okay. Next, okay, we have our sauce all mixed up. So we would cook the onion and garlic for about 3 to 4 minutes until the onion starts to soften. But since we are almost out of time, we're doing all right. I'm just gonna go ahead and mix the sauce in so you can see how it'll thicken as it continues to cook and how it coats the tofu. I'll turn the heat down a little bit. So it's a little bit watery right now, but after a few minutes, that flavor will get in. Tofu doesn't have really any flavor, hardly any. So if you're not used to cooking it, that's good to know that, you want to marinate it or like really soak it in the sauce, give it the opportunity to soak in the flavor. Oh, and Erica, going back to your question about freezing it, when you freeze tofu, it actually changes the texture of it, and it becomes like more spongy. So it actually will absorb marinade better, and it has a more meat-like texture. So if that's what you like, you can do it that way. I personally don't like the texture of it. That's my personal preference. So I don't like to freeze it like that. But when I've made our tofu taco meat recipe and frozen it, then and then thawed and eaten it, I did like the texture of that. So kind of different when you freeze it and it's already cooked. So that's kind of how the chorizo looks. This is probably cold, but I'll just go ahead and show you how the rest of this would work. We would just toss in some spinach and since it's not hot, it's gonna take a while to wilt, so I'm not gonna add the full amount, but it would be 4 cups. And, you know, if you were cooking this at home and it's still hot, you can kind of just turn off the heat and that residual heat will wilt the spinach, and then it's ready to go. And you can just eat it with pasta or crusty bread, which is what I served with some sourdough. And that's it. You got your 1-pot dinner on the table, and it works well for leftovers. Okay. Really quick, I just want to mention a few of our other recipes. We've been doing these cooking classes for probably close to 15 years now. And so we have all those recipes on our website. So people always ask me, where do you go for recipes? And I say, well, Cookbowl Berkeley is my go-to, because everything's like pretty simple, affordable. There's a lot of plant-based things on there. And it's all organized by type, and then certain allergens are mentioned. So it's a really user-friendly page, as best as we can do with our UC Berkeley resources, I think. So if you're looking for egg substitutions, which I think a lot of people are right now because eggs are a little on the pricey side, or if you don't eat eggs or just run out, we have recipes like scrambled tofu. A tofu egg salad where you use the medium firm tofu. It actually has a texture of a boiled egg white. Chinese corn soup, which is one of my favorites, that uses a silken tofu, so it's meant to kind of mimic like a egg drop soup. And a recipe that we did earlier this spring was deviled potatoes. That was kind of fun. They kind of look like deviled eggs. And then for dairy substitutions, we have a recipe for oat milk, skillet lasagna, and stuffed shells that use tofu to make a ricotta, but it has so much other flavor that you really can't tell. The stuffed shells are one of my favorites. I've made that for a lot of people and they really like it. And whoops, kind of making a mess there. And then finally, we have some meat and fish replacements that are kind of fun. Plus, I also want to mention, we have a lot of recipes that are like naturally plant-based, where we're not trying to mimic anything, right? But in the spirit of today's class, I thought that would be fun to talk about. So we have cauliflower wings. We have a gardener's pie that's like shepherd's pie, lentil meatballs, a marinated tomato poke for making poke bowls, tempeh breakfast sausage, and again, the tofu tacos that I mentioned. So we're gonna wrap up there, and if you're here in person, then we'll do our